I'm Mary Baker-Boudissa with Project Success, and I'm here today with Brad Rosebrock. And I want to thank you for being here, Brad. Why don't you tell us what district you're from?
I teach at Brownsburg High School.
Great. Well, it's so good to have you. And today we're talking about formative assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And I have just a few questions for you today.
Great.
Tell us how formative assessment has affected your collaboration with other educators.
At Brownsburg High School, we do a lot with common assessments. More so maybe in the gen ed classrooms, not so much historically in the special ed classrooms, but kind of going towards more formative assessments has enabled our special education teachers during our professional learning community meetings to be able to compare apples to apples, when it comes to instruction and student learning, and the formative assessments have kind of helped with that. We're able to share ideas and share student growth and experiences with each other during those meetings that just continues to improve our instruction.
So Brad, tell me how formative assessment has affected your students who have significant cognitive disabilities.
It's really helped me, I think, and more because I'm able to, more on the fly, be able to see the learning that's taking place, or maybe some stumbling blocks that either in the middle of the activity or, kind of referencing back, reflecting back later, something that I might need to work on, like later that week or later in a unit that we might be doing.
So what's one of your favorite formative assessment strategies in working with students?
Just asking questions throughout and providing the students just multiple means, and especially the means of communication that works best for them, whether that's a communication board, whether that's visuals with the words on there, like vocabulary words, academic vocabulary. Maybe it's just the words without the pictures. And maybe it's the student just kind of vocalizing, saying, the answer, just to kind of keep them on track with the activity and kind of gauge their student learning during the activity.
So, Brad, what insight would you share with new teachers regarding formative assessment?
Don't be afraid just because it's something that might sound new or something that you haven't done. I think there's actually a lot of teachers that use formative assessments. They just don't necessarily call it that. Just be patient with the process. Try to build it into your instruction. Model it for the students. I think that's important. But just jump right in. Don't be so afraid of doing it that it kind of holds you back.
So can you share with those new teachers and teachers who maybe are struggling with formative assessment a success story that you have?
Yes. There was a lot of grade level content material using the Indiana Alternate Academic Standards or the content connectors, like science activities, talking about states of matter, talking about gravity, other math concepts that I'd never really worked with my students before. And by using formative assessments, I was able to gauge during the activity, are they catching on to this or not? Or do I need to go back and kind of go over this, reteach it? Are there students who maybe need to do like a different activity, like in a smaller group? Is a larger group not working for them? And the formative assessments kind of helped out with that, and just really helped with my students being able to answer that grade level material.
So tell me, what does presuming competence mean to you?
Not having lowered expectations for students. Really, the opposite of that, really having high expectations. I've heard before the word rigor used, and I used to only think of that more with like gen ed instruction, but I really kind of take that to heart now as a special education teacher. I want to have increased expectations, higher expectations, and rigor for my students. Not lowballing what they are able to do and what they know, and sometimes just having my assumption that just because they're not able to communicate the knowledge that they might have doesn't mean that that knowledge isn't there.
So Brad, as we talk about presuming competence and high expectations for students with significant disabilities, can you give me an example of what that looks like in your classroom?
There were times where we would do science activities, and one time in particular that I'm thinking about, just kind of the concept of gravity and motion and force and push and pull and whatnot. And my students were using that vocabulary and kind of talking about the activity that we had done like 2 or 3 weeks even after we had done the activity. And so that was kind of something, we did a lot with formative assessments, and we were able to kind of, decide what else do the students need, to kind of add on to that. And the fact that they were remembering and talking about and using that vocabulary like weeks later really made me think that that was a success.
So that was a direct result of your having high expectations and presuming that the students were competent in that area.
Yes, yes.
So how have parents and your peers and other educators reacted when they've seen the effects of using presumed competence and high expectations in your classroom?
My experiences have been very positive. All three of those groups, the parents, the peers, the non-disabled peers or gen ed peers of the students in my classroom, as well as my colleagues, have all been very impressed. And they definitely understand or are on board with, kind of this thinking outside the box, kind of different thinking, changing, assumptions and expectations about what students with significant disabilities are capable of. So in that sense, it's been a very positive experience for me at Brownsburg High School.
Brad, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about formative assessment with students with significant cognitive disabilities. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.